buzzing in, testing their buzzer, and identifying themselves starting out here.
Ari.
Govin, G-O-V-I-N-Z.
Hanson, H-A-N-S-O-N.
Do either of you have substitutions you'll be using?
No.
Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to project what the answers are. So, and also if I ask you to repeat your answer, don't be surprised. All right, toss-up number 1. Best of luck to both teams. A 2015 analysis by Richard Briggs showed that a study designed by this man has been consistently misrepresented in textbooks. This psychologist gave groups of subjects 2 lists of adjectives, with the only difference being the word warm or cold to test impression formation. This man's work on how children achieve acculturation may have been influenced by his own experience as a Polish-speaking immigrant who learned English as a teenager from reading Charles Dickens. This psychologist advocated the notion that subjects reinterpret the intended meaning of words based on information about the speaker to criticize Irving Lorge's experiment on prestige suggestion. In a 1951 experiment designed by this man, participants received cards with 3 lines on them. That is correct for 10 points. Your bonus. This method is used to solve optimization problems in which you need to maximize a function of several variables, subject to a constraint involving another function of several variables. For 10 points each, name this method of multipliers.
Lagrangian.
That is correct, Lagrangian. In the method of Lagrange multipliers, you apply this operator to each function, thus producing a vector field.
Divergence.
Divergence is incorrect, it is gradient. The method of Lagrange multipliers is often explained using these curves, to which the gradient must be perpendicular. They depict places at which the objective function's value is equal.
Normal, correct?
Incorrect. Level sets. 10 on the bonus. Toss up 2. A Fantasia quasi-sonata inspired by this poem begins with a series of left-hand octaves descending by tritones. In a symphony inspired by this poem...
Inferno?
Prompt?
Like Divine Comedy?
That's correct. Yes. Divine Comedy is correct. Your bonus. In a story titled For These Things, the protagonist recalls that when her husband was first brought home drunk, these things were in his buttonhole. For 10 points each, name these items. A man carrying that husband's dead body on a stretcher knocks these things over near the end of a story in which his wife searches for him at the Wrigley's house. Answer?
Watch.
Incorrect. Chrysanthemums.
Okay.
In this story, Paul rides frantically on the title Toy to predict races in his quest to be lucky. At its end, he dies after correctly picking Malabar and making his mother rich.
They want this story. Okay, the Rocking Horse Winner.
That's correct. The Rocking Horse Winner. And finally, both The Odor of Chrysanthemums and The Rocking Horse Winner are stories by this British author of Lady Chatterley's Lover. That's correct. D.H. Lawrence, 20 on the bonus. Toss up 3. This country's Shoyang-gu Alliance opposes the practice of fraudulently altering title deeds, which in 2015 led to the tear gassing of protesters on a school playground. This country's information minister, Joseph Moutourou, plans to tamper-proof land records using blockchain technology as part of its Silicon Savannah initiative. The Thika babies of this country were born to local mothers and Chinese immigrant fathers who came here to work on an enormous road project. 48 people died in May of 2018 in the failure of the Patel Dam in this country, where in 2017, Orange Democratic Movement leader Raila Odinga,
Kenya.
that is correct for 10 points, Kenya. Your bonus. These regiments rode ancestors of the modern Finna horse into battle. For 10 points each, named as Finnish Light Cavalry, commanded by Torsten Stalhans during the 30 Years' War. These cavalrymen got their name from a battle cry translated as "cut them down."
Berserkers.
No, they are the Hakapolita. This lion of the north personally led the Hakapolita at the Battle of Brettenfeld. This Swedish king lost his lion at the Battle of Lutzen.
Gustavus Adolphus.
Gustavus Adolphus is correct. The Swedish line of the House of Vasa ended when this daughter of Gustavus Adolphus assumed the throne on his death. This Minerva of the North abdicated and moved to Rome after converting to Catholicism.
Queen Christina.
That is correct. Queen Christina, 20 points on bonus. Class of 4. In a story by this author, highwaymen kill Count von Altenburg, leading to Hermann von Starkenfaust pretending to be a ghost in order to avoid delivering the news to Baron von Landshort's daughter. A grove of trees inscribed with the names of important men.
Irving.
That is correct. Washington Irving, 10 points. Your bonus. Pavo Jarvi is the principal conductor of an orchestra in this country which performs in Satorni Hall. For 10 points each, name this country, home to the NHK Symphony Orchestra, which has a tradition of assembling a 10,000-person chorus to sing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony every new year.
I think this is
Okay.
Japan.
Japan is correct. This Japanese conductor served as the Boston Symphony Orchestra's musical director for 29 years until 2002, and he later had 6 conversations with Haruki Murakami published in the book Absolutely on Music.
Ozawa.
Ozawa is correct. Ozawa conducted the premiere of this Japanese composer's November Steps for biwa, shakuhachi, and orchestra. This composer wrote the score to Akira Kurosawa's Ron.
Shoot. Maybe Takamitsu.
That's correct. Takamitsu, 30 on the bonus. Class of 5. A 3-dimensional algebra with this property is tame if it contains a multiplicative identity. Magic squares are described by this term if the pairs of opposite numbers are all sum to the square of the magic constant plus 1. A procedure named for light can test whether an operation defined by a given Cayley table has this property. Flexibility and alternativity.
Associativity?
Associativity is correct for 10 points. Your bonus. Joanna II of this kingdom named Alfonso V of Aragon as her heir before disowning him in favor of Louis, Duke of Calabria. For 10 points each, name this kingdom that was transferred from the Angevins to the Trastamara dynasty on its conquest by Alfonso. This southern Italian kingdom was paired with Sicily for most of its existence.
The Kingdom of Naples.
Correct, Kingdom of Naples. Alfonso V was a strong ally of this leader of the League of Leipzig, with whom he signed the Treaty of Gaeta. This subject of a biography by Miran Barletti led an expedition to Naples to secure the rule of Alfonso's son, Ferdinand I.
Skanderbeg?
That is correct, Skanderbeg. Alfonso was in diplomatic contact with this state, whose Emperor Yashak I proposed a royal marriage between his daughter and Infante Pedro. Medieval Christians believed that this empire was the home of the mythical Prester John.
Yeah.
Answer?
Abyssinia?
I'm sorry?
Abyssinia?
That is incorrect. Ethiopia. 20 on the bonus. Class of 6. According to Theophanes, the confessor, this man's predecessor hid in the forest near Adramyttium to avoid being proclaimed emperor. This general allied with Khan Tervel of Bulgaria to defeat the Second Arab Siege of Constantinople, during which he deposed Theodosius III to conclude the 20 Years' Anarchy. This ruler revised the Code of Justinian with his Ecloga law code.
Leo the Isaurian.
That is correct, or Leo III for 10 points. Your bonus. The third section of the book that fleshed out this idea claimed that corals, hymenopterans, non-human mammals, and humans are the 4 ends of evolution. For 10 points each, name this field of study, which advocates looking to the self-propagation of genes in non-human animals to explain human behavior, and was popularized by a 1975 book of the same name.
I don't know.
Cybernetics.
Incorrect. Sociobiology is the correct answer. This leading critic of sociobiology co-coined the term spandrel with Stephen Jay Gould. He advocates a constructivist view of evolution, which opposes the neo-Darwinian synthesis and emphasizes the role of organisms in creating environmental niches.
Smith.
Incorrect. Dick Lee Wonton. and sociobiology founder E.O. Wilson and Bert Holdobler wrote a 1990 textbook about these animals, which won a Pulitzer Prize for nonfiction. Wilson said of these animals, Karl Marx was right. Socialism works. It is just that he had the wrong species.
Ants.
That is correct for 10 points.
I want a protest part for you, the previous bonus.
The fifth bonus
Bonus 5 part for you.
of Ethiopia,
I believe our answer is
Abyssinia.
I believe our answer is Abyssinia.
I will put that with the committee and we'll get that resolved. Give me 1 second.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Pardon the delay. Okay, that has been lodged. I'll hopefully have an answer at the house. Toss-up 7. We'll continue. Edward Fairfax and Richard Carew both translated poems about this conflict. Eleoxy and Beatrix are the names given to the mother of the Swan Knight, a legendary ancestor of a participant in this conflict. Gandor of Uai wrote several epic poems set during this conflict. In an epic set during this conflict, Armida falls in love.
First Crusade.
That is correct for 10 points. First Crusade. Your bonus. This collection calls Magometh a false prophet and a sorcerer, and it was compiled by Jacobus de Moranier. For 10 points each, named this most popular medieval collection of hagiographies, which disseminated stories throughout Europe, popularizing characters such as Saint Barbara.
Golden Legend.
Correct, Golden Legend. The Golden Legend recounts the story of this patron saint of France. After being beheaded, he legendarily walked miles preaching from a severed head held in his hands. He is sometimes conflated with the first convert in Athens.
Dennis.
Dennis is correct, for Denis, Saint Denis. One of the most popular stories from the Golden Legend was the account of this saint, a Roman soldier who slew a dragon. He is the patron saint of Catalonia and is revered in a Caucasian country that bears his name.
George.
St. George is correct, 30 on the bonus. Toss of 8. This text says that the body is dust, the wind speaks through it, and that the matter constituting the human body was recycled many times as rocks in mountains, in a passage about how it took innumerable births to produce a human body. A passage from this text recited as an evening prayer is called the Reras. One part of this text says that uttering brings power, silence brings no power, and that by being quiet, peace cannot be found even if poised in deep meditation forever, in a passage known as the Japji. This text, which devotees wave a yak hair fan over.
The Adigram.
I'm sorry?
The Adigram.
That is correct. Adigram for 10 points. Your bonus. When these events occur, they can lead to soil liquefaction. For 10 points each, name these phenomenons that occur along Wadati-Benioff zones.
Yeah, subduction.
I'm sorry?
Subduction.
No, earthquakes, not subduction.
Oh.
This variety of earthquake is when the speed of the rupture exceeds that of the S-wave velocity.
Okay. What variety?
Answer?
Strike slip.
What's that?
Strike slip.
No, super shear earthquakes. And finally, earthquakes can be induced by human activity, including this method of breaking up underground rocks.
Fracking.
Fracking is correct, 10 points on the bonus. Toss up 9. Evolutionary biologist Robert Trivers once drove a getaway car for this organization, one of whose leaders, Richard Aoki, was a secret police informant. A false story that a member of this organization, Raymond Hewitt, impregnated actress Jean Seberg, was engineered by the FBI. Tom Wolfe's Radical Chic documents a fundraiser.
Black Panther.
Black Panther Party is correct for 10. Your bonus. This character is able to grab Paris's helmet until the helmet is magically broken by Aphrodite. For 10 points each, name this King of Sparta, who is healed by Machaon after Pandarus violates a truce by shooting him with an arrow.
Menelaus.
Menelaus is correct. The Trojan War escalates when Menelaus invoked this vow from other Greek kings, who pledged to honor Helen's choice of husband.
Okay, what is that?
I'd actually get this.
Answer?
Chastity vow.
I'm sorry?
Chastity vow?
No, Oath of Tyndareus.
Okay.
And following the Trojan War, Menelaus journeyed to this land where he found the real Helen. The Serapis cult was introduced by the Ptolemaic Greek monarchs of this place.
Egypt.
Egypt is correct. How many on the bonus? 20 on the bonus. Time out. We will have a 1 minute break. For Death say 30 seconds. We'll say 1 minute. While we're in the timeout, I'll announce that the protest was ruled that Abyssinia should be accepted. So that's 10 additional points. That was bonus number. If I look at it.
Bonus 5.
5. Bonus 5.
Just mark that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
161 pounds.
They can have a switching thing.
Score check.
I have a score of Illinois 160, Ohio 110.
All right.
Take it.
All right, timeout is over. Time for toss-up number 10, the last of the half. A transporter of this element is mutated in a disease that causes kinky hair and growth failure, named for Minkies. This metal is bound with a high affinity of the octa-repeat region of prion protein. ATP7A is responsible for the transport of this metal across the cell membrane. Bizinc-onic acid chelates with an ion of this metal in a commonly used test for measuring protein concentration. In superoxide dismutase 1, this metal is responsible for the oxidation of superoxide to oxygen. Zinc powder coupled with this metal is commonly used in a cyclopropanation reaction of alkenes. The sulfate of this metal is responsible. Copper is correct for 10. Your bonus. A novel by this author interweaves the narratives of the recently bereaved British teenager George and of the Renaissance fresco painter Francesco del Casa. For 10 points each, name the Scottish author, whose Booker Prize nominated novels include How to Be Both and a 2016 novel about centenarian songwriter Daniel Gluck.
Anything? Wins.
Incorrect. Ali Smith. That latter novel by Smith, which has been called the first post-Brexit novel, has this title. This season is also the subject of a Keats ode, which describes it as the season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun.
Autumn.
Autumn is correct. The Brexit vote also inspired the play My Country, a work in progress by this Scottish poet and playwright. Her poetry collections include The World's Wife, and she is the current British Poet Laureate.
Williams.
Carol Ann Duffy. 10 on the bonus. And that's the half.
With the half I have Illinois 180, Ohio 110.
Correct.
We'll have another 1 minute break.
Excellent.
I really don't.
It's kind of like in the form.
Those are your
But like just okay.
And then you can
I don't know. I think it's new. I think it's purple. I think I'm not sure.
All right, time. We will now start with toss-up number 11. Best of luck to both teams. Here we go. At 12 years old, this man accidentally killed teenager Ruth Merwin while demonstrating rifle drill techniques. After being hit with a sign by protesters in October 1963, he warned John F. Kennedy about coming to Dallas. A Pulitzer-winning photograph showed this man on the campaign trail with a hole in the sole of his right shoe.
Ally Stevenson.
That is correct. Adlai Stevenson. Your bonus. This epistle circularly declares that the commandment we have had from the beginning is that we love one another, and that this is love that we walk according to his commandments. For 10 points each, name this very short, non-Pauline epistle written by the elder and addressed to the elect lady and her children, which is usually understood to be the title of an early Christian community. Answer?
Galatians.
No, 2 John.
Okay.
The Johannine epistles, especially 1 John, are generally understood to be polemics against this sort of belief system, whose name becomes the secret knowledge it claimed to hold. Many heretical Christian groups of this sort believe that Jesus was incorporeal, because matter is inherently evil.
Aren't these like agnostics?
Okay.
Gnosticism?
That's correct, Gnosticism. And finally, this term is used in the Johannine epistles to refer to he who denies the Father and the Son, the theological enemies of their author and his community. In another text, it was later used to refer to a specific apocalyptic being.
Yeah,
Antichrist.
Antichrist is correct for 20 on the bonus. Toss up 12. The blue writer artist Gabriel Mutter made a painting titled For the Breakfast of These Things. Other than salt marshes, Martin Johnson Heed primarily painted flowers with these things. Likewise, a genre in Chinese painting is named for these things and flowers. One of these things on top of two wall-mounted rings with a small chain was painted by Carol Fabricius. Joseph Wright of Derby painted an experiment on one of these things, and it...
Like a bird?
Bird is correct for 10
Yes.
points. Though it is usually homemade, this beverage is served throughout its homeland in special houses named for it, where Osmaries often perform tizata music. For 10 points each, name this honey wine, bittered with the powdered leaves of the buckthorn-like gesho plant. It is usually served in a long-necked container called a barrel.
What do you think? Not matzah.
Latte?
No, incorrect. The answer is Taj. What's that? Taj is brewed in this country, or Tage, I apologize, T-E-J. Tage is brewed in this country, where food is typically prepared in a thick stew called wat, using a mixture of spices called berbere, and served atop spongy sourdough flatbread called injera.
Yeah, okay. Ethiopia.
Ethiopia is correct. Injera is made from this grain, which was domesticated in the Ethiopian highlands, and is still a staple crop in both Ethiopia and Eritrea.
Tef.
Tef is correct. 20 on the bonus. Timeout has been called. We will have 1 minute. We just did 12. Okay. Yes, the score is currently Illinois A, 240 points, Ohio A, 110 points. We have just completed toss-up number 12 in bonus. If both teams agree, we can go ahead and get started. Both good with that?
Yeah.
Good. Here we go. Toss number 13. No more timeouts left. Peter Godfrey Smith attributed to Elizabeth Anscombe a doctrine of minimalism with respect to this relation, in which it merely bundles together more specific relations. David Lewis used the notion that some possible worlds are closer to actuality than others to define a counterfactual theory of this.
Causation.
Causation is correct for 10. Your bonus. A character created by this author cries in the bathroom after his bride first returns to his house, since she immediately started throwing his books on the floor. For 10 points each, name this author who in that novel wrote of Peter Kyne, a retiring philologist whose obsession with his 25,000-volume private library eventually leads to him going mad and burning both his books and his wife in a massive fire.
Canetti.
Canetti is correct, Elias Canetti. And in another instance of literary immolation, following the Lisbon earthquake, Dr. Pangloss appears to have been killed in an auto-da-fe in this novella by Voltaire. The title character seeks out the best of all possible worlds, but is continually stymied.
Candide.
Candide is correct. And this author adapted the legend of Joan of Arc's burning at the stake in an 1801 tragedy. He wrote Don Carlos and The Robbers.
Yep. Schiller.
Schiller is correct for 30. Toss of 14. This poet described a towery city and branching between towers in a poem titled For a Philosopher Who He Thought of in...
Hawkins.
That is correct. 10 points, your bonus. This composition quickly modulates through 3 keys of descending thirds, forming an augmented chord in the roots. For 10 points each, name this composition whose radical harmonic progressions were based on its composer's namesake Changes. It was released on an eponymous 1960 record featuring the songs Nania and Mr. PC.
Okay, so this is Giant Steps. Giant Steps.
Correct, Giant Steps. Giant Steps was written by this saxophone virtuoso and jazz composer, known as much for his early hard bop as for his avant-garde compositions A Love Supreme and Ascension.
Coltrane.
John Coltrane is correct. This other saxophonist chanted John Coltrane's name on a track titled for him, featured on his album Glass Bead Games. This saxophonist's first album was a legendary session with John Gilmore called Blowing In from Chicago.
No, like, this guy's like, Dolphy?
Incorrect. Clifford Jordan, 20 on the bonus. Toss up 15. For a photon gas, this quantity is proportional to the product of volume and temperature to the fourth power. The average value of this quantity can be calculated as the partial derivative of natural log of the partition function with respect to inverse temperature. Replacing entropy with temperature as the independent variable in this function through Legendre transform gives the Helmholtz.
Wait, what? Gives free energy?
Incorrect. Big 5. Gives the Helmholtz free energy. The partial derivative of this quantity with respect to temperature at constant volume gives the specific heat. For 10 points, name this quantity whose change is defined as the sum of heat supplied to the system and work done on the system by the first law of thermodynamics.
Total internal energy.
That is correct for 10 points. Your bonus. The title character of this story tries to kill herself with 20 tablets of Veronal. After waking up 2 days later, she shares a drink with her maid, Nettie. For 10 points each, name the short story in which Hazel Morse struggles with alcoholism and depression at Jenny's bar. Answer? Big Blonde. Big Blonde is a short story by this author. She wrote book reviews as constant reader. Dorothy Parker is correct. Hazel Morse's husband, Herbie, moved to this city for a job in Big Blonde. This is the home city of the woman in yellow, and for colored girls who have considered suicide, the rainbow is enough, and is where the economic migrants and Harriet Arnaud's, the doll maker, find industrial work. Answer?
London.
No, Detroit. 10 on the bonus. Toss up 16. This man denounces another character as a little wise apple after being told, I got 20/20 hearing. A song addressed to this character is switched with cool in the film adaptation. This character, who was first portrayed on both stage and screen by William Brandley,
Like Officer Krupke.
Officer Krupke is correct for 10 points. Your bonus. For 10 points each, answer the following about St. Olga of Kiev. After the death of her husband Igor at the hands of the Drevlians, Olga got her revenge by killing the Drevlian leader, who was burned in one of these places. One of these places in Moscow, known as the Sanduni, was established by an actor during the reign of Catherine the Great.
Okay, theater.
No, these are bathhouses.
Okay.
Olga converted to Christianity in this imperial city, where the Emperor Constantine VII described her conversion in his De Ceremoniis.
Constantinople.
Constantinople is correct. This historical redaction by Nestor, which covers the 9th through 12th centuries, is the main source for the biography of Olga.
The Primary Chronicle.
Primary Chronicle is correct for 20. Toss of 17. In a tale told by these people, a mosquito convinces a boy not to swat by protesting that it is a grandfather. This group's mythology includes a race of shapeshifters who always have red eyes no matter what animal form they take, and the demon Mahaha, which uses its freakishly long arms and fingers to tickle people to death. In a story from this culture, a blind boy is deceived into thinking he has failed to shoot a bear and drowns his mother in revenge. A culture hero of these people is the only member of his village who was not drowned by a seal because he was kind to an orphan. And another of their myths, the severed fingers of the daughter.
Like Inuit?
Inuit is correct for 10. Your bonus. Attempts to explain discrepancies of this value include higher dimensional gravity. For 10 points each, name this quantity currently believed to be approximately 0.877 femtometers. Recent experiments of Pohl et al., however, have led the scientists to suspect that it may be slightly lower.
Rate of expansion.
No, because it was just a Planck length.
No, it's a radius of a proton, or size of a proton. For their measurements, Pohl et al. Used a muon instead of an electron to induce a smaller Bohr radius in atomic hydrogen. Both electrons and muons are this type of particle with a spin of 1/2.
Yeah.
Lepton.
Lepton is correct. Hull et al. Measured the radius of a proton by measuring this energy difference between two s1/2 and two p1/2 orbitals. Its theoretical value was calculated by Hans Bethe. Answer.
No answer.
Land shift is the correct answer. 10 on the bonus. Toss up 18. Can we get a score check?
At the three left, I have Ohio 190 and Illinois 295.
With 3 cycles left, we have Illinois 295, Ohio 190. Best of luck to both teams. Toss up number 18. This virus copies its genome with the RNA-dependent 3D whole polymerase. Nahum Sonnenberg discovered the internal ribosome entry site in this virus. Its genome was sequenced in 1981 by Eckhard Wimmer's group, which later spearheaded its revolutionary de novo synthesis. This virus dissociates into 135S and 80S particles upon binding to its namesake Ig-like receptor CD155. The PVR-TG strains are mouse models of its namesake disease. This virus may disseminate into the CNS via BBB permeation or, like rabies, through retrograde axonal transport along motor neurons. Serotypes of this virus are named for Albert Sabin, who did
Polio.
Polio is correct for 10 points. Your bonus. A thought bubble in this painting reads, "I don't care, I'd rather sink than call Brad for help." For 10 points each, name this painting that shows the paddle blue-haired person with tears in her eyes in a turbulent sea.
Drowning Girl.
Drowning Girl is correct. Drowning Girl is by this American pop artist who also created a painting showing a red-haired woman holding a telephone and "Oh, alright," along with a diptych of a jet plane dogfight and wham!
Liechtenstein.
Liechtenstein is correct. And Liechtenstein's art used this printing technique to capture the visual feel of comic books. This technique overlaps and spaces colored patterns to produce different colors and shadings.
Band-Aid dots.
Bid-Day Dots is correct for 30. Toss of 19. A character in this novel spends his scholarship money on sex, hoping to be expelled, but nobody ever finds out. After a war ends in this novel, the protagonist declares his wish that the darkness of his heart equal the darkness of the night. The narrator of this novel thinks that a curse he put on his neighbor is fulfilled when her boyfriend kills her and sees a woman give her lover a cup of tea with her own breast milk. Its protagonist decides...
The Temple of the Golden Pavilion?
I'm sorry?
The Temple of the Golden Pavilion?
The Temple of the Golden Pavilion is correct. Yes! For 10 points. Your bonus. Jaroslav Schlegel has argued that this condition can increase the risk of schizophrenia and car accidents, among other things. For 10 points each, name this parasitic condition that asymptomatically infects more than a third of the world's population. In rodents, it has been shown to alter behavior in ways that increase risk of predation by cats, which are its definitive host.
This is, it's like, I can't,
Answer?
it's like triton, I can't say the word.
No, it's a toxoplasmosis. Among humans, toxoplasmosis is only a serious health threat for people with weakened immune systems, especially reduced CD4 counts due to this retrovirus that attacks helper T cells. HIV is correct. And infections that often afflict immunocompromised people, like AIDS patients, are often described by this adjective. Examples include HHV8, which causes Kaposi sarcoma.
Opportunistic.
Opportunistic infections is correct for 20 on the bonus. Time for toss-up 20, the last. During World War II, this politician preempted Operation Alacrity by leasing Lajes Field to the Allies. Like Engelbert Dollfuss, this person incorporated the encyclical Quadragesimo Anno into a corporatist constitution. After a 1936 naval mutiny, this dictator opened a prison known as the Camp of the Slow Death at Tarrafal, which was run...
Salazar.
Salazar is correct for 10 points, and your bonus. Answer the following about the career of Lilburn Boggs for 10 points each. Boggs was governor of Missouri during this border conflict with Iowa, which gained its name after the produce from 3 trees was cut down. It was resolved when the Sullivan Line was drawn.
Honeymore.
The Honey War is correct. Boggs used Missouri Executive Order 44 to call for followers of this region to be exterminated or driven from the state if necessary for the public peace, which led to many of them fleeing to Nauvoo, Illinois.
Mormonism.
That is correct, or the Latter-day Saints. And finally, Boggs miraculously survived assassination after moving near to the temple lot in this city, which Joseph Smith argued would be the site of the millennial city Zion. Answer?
Independence.
Independence is correct for a young bonus, and that's the game. And we have a final score.
I have a final score of Ohio 270 and Illinois 325.
Very good game. Congratulations.